Good morning, everybody. So today you'll need your notice and note packet, and you're going to turn to page 9. So page 9 looks like this, and it says Excerpts from Hatchet by Gary Paulson. Cool thing about Hatchet is we actually have 2 students in our class who that's their book club or like reading group book for this session or this probably month or so. So there are people in our class who are reading this book. So this is a little clue into the book that they're reading. So Hatchet. So what we're going to do today, so Hatchet, this excerpt is a little bit longer of one. So it's page 9, page 10, and page 11. So what we're going to do while we read is we're going to practice taking some notes on this while we're reading. We might look in the margins, write something in the margins, either thoughts or ideas that we have while you're reading. So I'm going to get started reading, and then I'll have at least one point on this page where I'll stop and I'll jot something down. Brian Robeson stared out the window of the small plane at the endless green northern wilderness below. It was a small plane, a Cessna 406, a bush plane, and the engine was so loud, so roaring and consuming and loud, that it ruined any chance for conversation. Not that he had much to say. He was 13 and the only passenger on the plane with a pilot named, what was it? Jim or Jake or something, who was in his mid-40s and who had been silent as he worked to prepare for takeoff. In fact, since Brian had come to the small airport in Hampton, New York, to meet the plane, driven by his mother, the pilot had spoken only 5 words to him. Get in the co-pilot seat, which Brian had done. They had taken off, and that was the last of the conversation. There had been the initial excitement, of course. He had never flown in a single-engine plane before, and to be sitting in the co-pilot seat with all the controls right there in front of him, all the instruments in his face as the plane clawed for altitude, jerking and sliding on the wind currents as the pilot took off, had been interesting and exciting. Now Brian sat, looking out the window with the roar thundering through his ears, and tried to catalog what had led up to his taking this flight. The thinking started. Always it started with a single word: divorce. So I'm going to just stop and jot and think about what has happened so far. So we know Brian and that he's flying somewhere. And we know that he's the only one on the plane, only passenger on the plane, I should say. The pilot's there. And we know that his parents got divorced. It was an ugly word, he thought, a tearing, ugly word that meant fights and yelling, lawyers. God, he thought, how he hated lawyers who sat with their comfortable smiles and tried to explain to him in legal terms how all that he lived in was coming apart, and the breaking and shattering of all solid things. His home, his life, all the solid things. Divorce, a breaking word, an ugly breaking word. Divorce. Secrets. No, not secrets so much as just the secret. What he knew and had not told anybody. What he knew about his mother that had caused the divorce. What he knew. The secret. Divorce. The Secret. So it seems like this divorce keeps coming up. So this divorce must be significant for Brian. And it kind of sounds like maybe he was stuck in the middle a little bit because he knows what happened, or he knows why they got divorced. He says what he knew about his mother that had caused the divorce. So he knows why it happened. Brian felt his eyes beginning to burn and knew there would be tears. He had cried for a time, but that was gone now. He didn't cry now. The pilot sat large, his hands lightly on the wheel, feet on the rudder pedals. He seemed more a machine than a man, an extension of the plane. When he saw Brian look at him, the pilot seemed to open up a bit, and he smiled. Ever fly in the co-pilot seat before? He leaned over and lifted the headset off his right ear and put it on his temple, yelling to overcome the sound of the engine. Brian shook his head. It's not as complicated as it looks. Good plane like this almost flies itself. The pilot shrugged. Makes my job easy. He took Brian's left arm. Here, put your hands on the controls, your feet on the rudder pedals, and I'll show you what I mean. Brian shook his head. I'd better not. Sure, try it. Brian reached out and took the wheel in a grip so tight his knuckles were white. He pushed his feet down on the pedals. The plane slewed suddenly to the right. Not so hard. Take her light, take her light. Brian eased off, relaxed his grip. The burning in his eyes was forgotten momentarily as the vibration of the plane came through the wheel and the pedals. It seemed almost alive. See? The pilot let go of his wheel, raised his hands in the air, and took his feet off the pedals to show Brian he was actually flying the plane alone. Simple. Now turn the wheel a little bit to the right and push on the right rudder pedal a small amount. Brian turned the wheel slightly, and the plane immediately banked to the right. And when he pressed on the right rudder pedal, the nose slid across the horizon to the right. He left off on the pressure and straightened the wheel, and the plane righted itself. Now you can turn. Bring her back to the left a little. Brian turned the wheel left, pushed on the left pedal, and the plane came back around. It's easy, he smiled, at least this part. Really cool that he's flying the plane. The pilot nodded. All of the flying is easy. Just takes learning, like everything else. Like everything else. He took the controls back, then reached up and rubbed his left shoulder. Aches and pains must be getting old. Brian let go of the controls and moved his feet away from the pedals as the pilot put his hands on the wheel. Thank you. But the pilot had put his headset back on, and the gratitude was lost in the engine noise, and things went back to Brian looking out the window at the ocean of trees and lakes. The burning eyes did not come back, but memories did. Came flooding in. The words, always the words. Divorce. The secret. Fights. Split. The big split. Brian's father did not understand as Brian did. Knew only that Brian's mother wanted to break the marriage apart. The split had come, and then the divorce, all so fast, and the court had left him with his mother, except for the summers and what the judge called visitation rights. So formal. So you can write your last thought on the bottom, and then I want you to open up your yellow notebook. So look for your yellow notebook, which should say reading on it, and your name. Yellow notebook, you're going to turn to the next blank page, which should be right after Words of the Wiser. So again and again is the notice and note signpost we're talking about today. So today's date is 10/27/20, so make sure you have that written down. And then I'd like you to write down these notes. So again and again is when the author keeps bringing up the same image, phrase, or reference. So the author continues in the story to bring up the same thing over and over again. Your job is to think, why is the author bringing this up again and again? What's his purpose behind doing that? So, of course, pause this video if you need to finish writing this down. But I want to talk about Hatchet. So in Hatchet, in this section, the author keeps bringing up the divorce. So it happens in the first page, it happens on the second page, it happens on the first page, on the third page. He keeps bringing it up over and over again. So your job is to think about why does the author keep bringing that up? What is his purpose behind doing that? Once you've thought about that answer, your job is to write that answer in Google Classroom. Make sure that you have at least 3 complete sentences. Think about capitals at the beginning, periods at the end, complete sentence.